Liebe Kollegen, die sogenannte Strong Customer Authentication im Rahmen der Payment Services Direktive, der PSD2 genau genommen, hat uns im Lauf des Jahres, des Sommers sehr, sehr stark beschäftigt. Im Moment gibt es ein wenig Entwarnung, weil die eigentliche Einführung ja erst aufs nächste Jahr verschoben wurde. Genau genommen haben wir bis Ende 2020 eigentlich Zeit, aber deswegen, weil natürlich wir uns jetzt vorbereiten müssen und nicht uns erlauben können, noch ein weiteres Mal in irgendeiner Form zu schlampen oder zu spät zu kommen oder unsere Prozesse nicht im Griff zu haben. Es gibt einen zweiten Grund, warum wir uns mit dem Thema Payment aktuell deutlich mehr beschäftigen müssen, als wir es in der Vergangenheit gemacht haben. Und das liegt daran, dass die Nutzung der Endgeräte sich verändert. Jeder, der in seine Statistiken schaut, der weiß, dass wir einfach viel, viel mehr Kunden haben, die sich heute über mobile Endgeräte bei uns im Shop bewegen. Und eins ist klar, in dem Moment, wenn ich auf einem mobilen Gerät bin, dann ist die Eingabe von persönlichen Kundendaten deutlich schwieriger. Das ist auch eine Sache, die man deutlich weniger macht und wo man immer sich ein bisschen beobachtet fühlt. Man ist eben nicht im sicheren Ambiente vor seinem Rechner zu Hause, wo einem keiner über die Schulter schauen kann. Aus diesem Grund ist generell der Einsatz von bestimmten Zahlarten hier im mobilen Bereich deutlich stärker. Und ich freue mich, dass wir heute Experten auch wiederum für ein extra Webinar mit Google gefunden haben, direkt aus Dublin. Das ist ein Senan und Victor. Victor haben der einen oder andere von euch schon kennengelernt beim Google Day unseres Verbandes. Und ich freue mich, dass wir heute uns ein bisschen länger damit auseinandersetzen können, wie Google Pay als ein Beispiel eben in dieses Thema der SCA reinpasst und auch generell, wie wir uns aufstellen können, damit wir an der Hürde, an der eigentlichen Hürde beim Einkaufen nicht scheitern, unsere Conversion deutlich treiben können. Damit übergebe ich gerne den Bildschirm an Senan und Victor und wünsche euch jetzt viel Spaß mit dem Thema Strong Customer Authentication. Kein schönes Thema, ein lästiges Thema, aber eines, was wirklich ein großer Hebel für uns auch in der Conversion sein kann.
Hi all, thank you all for joining the webinar from Google and the bevh. We are still fighting with some technical difficulties, but should be live in a minute. I can already give an introduction of who I am, what the intro is, what the topic is of today, and who else will be joining. I'm Victor Bergmann. I'm in charge of the merchant relations for Google Pay in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And the topic of today's agenda will be PSD2 and SCA, not just Google Pay focused, but in general. What is it? What are the latest updates? What can merchants do to be compliant? And then that's the first half, which is going to be led by Senan. And then in the second half, I'm going to go into more detail on how Google Pay can help merchants to be compliant with SCA. Yeah, and I'll hand it over to Senan right now.
Perfect. So thanks all for joining. My name, like Victor said, is Geraghty. I'm a payments consultant here within Google. Been with Google since about November last year. Prior to joining Google, I've worked for Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, a number of Irish pillar banks, and co-led the Deloitte payment practice here within Ireland. So yeah, I'm going to be bringing you guys through PSD2 and SCA and the potential impacts of your business and how, you know, some kind of tips, tricks around things that you should do in relation to developing your strategy, you know, moving forward. Also, you know, what the EBA are saying, even though there's delays, what that means for your business, etc. So what is SCA? So strong customer authentication is a subset requirement under the PSD2 directive. So really what the European Commission is trying to do is obviously make the online world as secure as the offline world. So in the offline, obviously we have chip and pin at point of sale, etc. In the online world, what do we have? We have an iframe, and potentially if merchants decide, they can implement 3D secure onto their website. But on the flip side of that, that adds friction, and you know we see this, you know, as being a not really an optimal solution. So the Commission has come out and they've created this new strong customer authentication requirements, and on the back of that, developing a new protocol to allow other elements other than password like fingerprint, facial recognition, etc., to be used as an authentication method to try and make it more frictionless at the checkout flow. So what are the elements that are required to actually authenticate at the under PSD2 and strong customer authentication? So it must be two of the following. Two is something you know, something you own, or something you are. On the desktop, you're going to see very much it's going to be around one-time password over SMS. And they're the elements that we're expecting to be the most used for authentication. If you only have one of these factors, unfortunately, the customer will not be able to authenticate on your website or through your payment provider. Therefore, the transaction would be, if the bank wants to challenge the transaction, it will be declined. Just some background and just some timeline on PSD2. So historically, when 3D Secure came out, it was really to obviously protect merchants online from chargebacks and to shift the liability to the card issuing bank. So if under 3D Secure 1.0, if you were using that on your website, it would allow the merchant to validate the customer based on parameters that they'd set up with their PSP, the payment service provider. And then that customer, once they've completed authentication, the liability would then shift to the card issuing bank. So if the chargeback 2, 3, 4 months down the line was to come in for, the customer disputing that they did not use the card on your website, that it was fraud, you would not be liable for the chargeback. However, it was optional before strong customer authentication came out, or before the 14th of September. It was optional whether or not merchants wanted to use this online. So a lot of merchants chose not to use it, obviously because of the additional friction and the huge drop off, around 40%. In some cases, we would see a drop off in conversions because of it. So what the Commission has decided to do under the new legislation is to shift that liability to the card issuing bank. So the card issuing bank is now liable for any chargebacks that occur. So they get to make the decision under PSD2 requirements since the 14th of September, whether or not they want to challenge the customer. So for you as a merchant, what does that mean? It means you lose control of that checkout process. So within that iframe, the experience your customer is going to have will depend on the card issuing bank that they bank with. So some issuing banks are going to have a very slick flow set up where it's going to be, fingerprint, and they'll move straight through quite frictionless. Other banks will be back to the 1.0 type of strong customer authentication 1.0, 3D Secure 1.0, which is the flow that we know today that causes a lot of friction and a lot of drop off. So for you as a merchant, you've actually lost the control over the customer experience. So what you can do is you'll just be sending the messages to obviously your through your payment provider to the card issuing bank, and they will be making that decision. As we go through this, we're going to give you some tips and tricks around things that you can do to try and reduce that friction, and strategies you can deploy around that as well. So 14th of September, 3D Secure 2.0 came into legislation and is written into the European legal journals. So it is in law today. However, I'm sure everybody on this call has heard of the various different delays announced by the competent authorities in countries. So the EBA has come out and has pretty much given a deadline of 31st of December 2020. So that's their recommendation and that's their opinion. However, countries like Ireland and the UK have given 18 months. France have given roughly 12 months plus an extra 12 months for the travel industry. So it's a very fragmented deployment of the legislation. So the legislation is in law. All it means is that nobody's going to get fined or go to jail or be brought to court for not being compliant. But for you as a merchant, it does not mean that you can wait 12 months to be ready. Okay. So we know that there's some large European banks that already have this in place and are set up and are ready to, step up the challenge through the iframe within the authentication flow, but are not doing that yet at the moment. But they are expected to begin challenge these customers and rolling it out. If they do not challenge, they bear the burden of obviously the chargeback liability. within the authorization message, when you send that through, the delays that have been announced doesn't mean that we're going to wait 12 months and then everybody go live again. What you will see over the next 12 to 18 months at different times is banks coming online with this, trying to challenge customers. If they cannot challenge, if they cannot step up through your iframe or your checkout flow, the chances are, a high likelihood is they'll decline the transaction. There's a new decline reason code which has been developed by the schemes, which pretty much says that could not authenticate, I believe is the wording around it. So for you as a merchant, you need to monitor these declines and your decline reporting with your processor to see if this is impacting your business at the moment. So again, just to say, under the EBA guidance, only under an exceptional basis that there will be a delay applied to the processors and the PSPs and the other relevant stakeholders to delay. Okay, so the different flows that we see, so 3D Secure 1.0, so that's the one that we know and I wouldn't say love today, but have lived with for the last number of years, causes a lot of friction and a lot of drop off. So what we're hearing out in the market at the moment is that many banks are still only available on the 1.0 solution. So they will be expected to still use this solution to step up customers, through the buy flow and through the authentication. Some banks and some processors will be ready under the 3D Secure 2.x. So there's 2.2 and 2.1. So the 2.1 protocol is pretty much what we have today. It allows for those inherent elements like the fingerprints, the voice recognition, the facial recognition. The 2.2 allows for Internet of Things devices. So that's the main difference between the two of them. Not much of a difference, but that's the main difference. 3D Secure 1.0 will be supported until 2021. After that, it's going to be discontinued, and every bank and processor, etc., will be on the new version of the protocol. So the flows we see here is obviously on the left hand side is the 1.0 and on the right hand side is the 2.0 versions. So the first example that we see is the one-time password over SMS. At the flow below that is the one that we expect to become the norm in the future, which will just be the fingerprint. So today we can unlock our phones very quickly by just tapping our finger against the device, and it's unlocked. That will be the same as well when we get to the authentication at the checkout. You'll be stepped up, asked to authenticate. You'll just touch your finger. The phone is the something you own. The fingerprint is the something you wear, is the inherent element, and you'll be authenticated. This is going to cause a lot of friction, and it's going to cause, in the short term, there'll be peaks and troughs of banks coming online with this over the 18 to 24 months. So what you'll see is as banks come online and begin challenging, you'll see a kind of dip in conversions, and then it will steady out and dips again. So what can you do to try and limit the impact to your customers? Well, there's a number of different exemptions that will be available. The first exemption is the low value exemption. So this works the same as contactless does out in the market today. So values not exceeding 30 euros, cumulative limit not exceeding 100, or not more than 5 consecutive transactions. Again, obviously within the parameters above that. Okay, below that, trusted beneficiaries. So what we know today is that Amex are the only scheme today that are ready for this. So this is whitelisting. So this will allow customers on your website, when they get the authentication message, to flag you as a trusted merchant. And when they come back to your website at a later date for a return purchase, they won't be stepped up or challenged by their card issuing bank. Now, like I said, Amex are ready with this, but Visa and MasterCard will not be ready with this until June 2020. So, everybody's watching the schemes. Hopefully they'll be ready earlier than this, but this is one that many merchants are hoping to use, obviously, again, to reduce that friction. For recurring payments, so this is where, subscription payments like Netflix, etc. So this will be where the customer, when they come to your website, you will authenticate them. And for the first transaction, so when they're first setting up the mandate with yourselves, so a mandate will be required. It will need to be very clear about how much they're going to be charged and when they will be charged. For these types of recurring payments, okay, if the amount or the dates change, etc., on when you're going to charge the customer. If it deviates from the mandate that you've set up and that they've authenticated at the time that they've added their card details, you will need to have them re-authenticate again. Okay, so for recurring transactions, your payment provider will flag it that it's a recurring transaction when they send it through to the card issuing bank for authorization, and then that transaction will be exempt from any challenges. Obviously, you know, this will be a one of those use cases where if the customer is not going to be in session, if you do need to step them up, or if the bank does need to challenge. So for a subscription business, you would need to have a process or think of a process to put in place for whatever reason. If that bank does decide to step up, even though the recurring flag is switched on, to reach out to the customer and get them to re-authenticate. On the other side of it is you have transactions called merchant initiated transactions, where the amount is not always going to be the same. So this depends on the amount potentially of usage, like a water meters or electricity bill, etc. So how will that work? So when the customer first signs up, again, they will be authenticated through the setting up a mandate. So when they add their card details, there'll be a mandate that you'll need to display to the customer, advising them of how much they'll be charged, when they'll be charged, etc. You know, the frequency of the charge. You know, you obviously may not know the exact amount that they will be charged, but the unit price for their usage. So when they authenticate that, they're giving you authorization to charge their card. Okay, so when you charge their card as a merchant initiated transaction, these transactions are out of scope for PSD2. Okay, so the bank will not challenge on the back of those. You will need to authenticate when it's first set up. Secure corporate payments. So corporate payments, corporate cards, they can be used by multiple people within an organization. So, you know, it doesn't make sense for them to actually be, for them to have to go through strong customer authentication. So that's going to be exempt as well. And then under the transaction risk analysis, so if your fraud rate is within these bands that are outlined, 13 basis points, 6 basis points, and 1 basis point, and your payment provider's fraud rate is within those bands also, you'll be able to apply for an exemption. So this is the big one, and this is the one that most merchants are going to be applying for and hope to utilize. Now, what I will say is, from what we've heard within various different discussion forums and also at the Merchant Risk Council this year in London, is that obviously processors want to protect themselves and their fraud rates. So they will actually potentially selectively choose the merchants who they're going to support with this. Okay, so if you're expecting or assuming that you'll send your traffic to your payment provider and you're assuming that they're just going to apply all the exemptions that are available to you, that may not be the case. Okay, so what you will need to do is definitely have that conversation with your provider and make sure that they're going to support you with this if this is one that you're going to utilize. This is something that you may want to consider for your business if you've got a mechanism that will allow you to potentially flag certain transactions where you want to apply for exemptions, and those that you may deem as potentially high risk, where you would normally in the Treaty Secure 1.0 scenario have stepped up the challenge through Verified by Visa and Secure Code. So again, just, you know, if you can segment that traffic, we would highly recommend you do that. Also, if you apply for any exemptions, the liability shifts for chargebacks shifts back to you as a merchant. So just keep that in mind as well, that if you have applied for an exemption and a chargeback and it's been accepted and a chargeback comes in, you'll be liable for that chargeback. So you'll have to go through the whole dispute mechanism, etc., to challenge the chargeback. So the OTP we've gone through, so I won't touch on that again. For the application of the TRA exemption for non-euro currencies, the EBA have given an exchange rate calculator, which is here, and you'll get everybody on the call will get the material and the deck afterwards, so you'll have the links available to you. The recalculation of fraud rates will occur every 90 days on a rolling basis, so every quarter on a rolling basis. So this is something you'll have to build into your process to continuously monitor your fraud rates throughout that period and your chargeback rates. If you are an organization that has branches, the TRA fraud rate cannot be calculated at branch level, it's at subsidiary level. So I've done many consultations around PSD2 with a lot of companies that work with Google, and this is something that has come up where it's being calculated for certain businesses that are quite large at the branch level and not actually at the subsidiary level. So this is just something to be aware of and make sure that you're on top of, because if you may have calculated your fraud rates incorrectly when going to your processor, and then suddenly you won't fall into the correct thresholds to apply for that exemption. So just something to be aware of. So transactions initiated by a merchant on behalf of the payee requires a mandate to be created. So this is just what we discussed earlier around the mandate. When the mandate is set up, that is set up through strong customer authentication, and needs to go through that process. And then merchants will only have 30 days, and we touched on that as well. So I'll just skip on. So potential impacts and risks to your business. So the directive may be implemented differently by different member states. So what we're hearing is that certain member states are going to apply are going to be less lenient with the exemptions than others. So what we're hearing is potentially the kind of Central European states are going to have a lot more rigor around the exemptions that they're going to support. So you'll see a lot more challenges. Whereas with the Nordics and Western Europeans, it's going to be a lot more along the lines of the exemptions being potentially accepted and the transactions being less frictionless and less challenges to customers. So that's just some of the things that we're hearing out on the market and that we're seeing on some of the forums that we're keeping on tab of. A lack of alignment as well amongst issuers, networks, and merchants. So you're going to have this throughout the whole process. So there's definitely, the schemes being at different levels of readiness, with Amex obviously with the whitelisting, and Visa and MasterCard as well, not being ready till June 2020. For your side, it requires a lot of investment of times and resources. So what I would suggest is definitely begin speaking with your processors if you're not already, and begin getting access to the sandbox and start testing these new authentication flows on the back of that. The TRA exemption we touched on would be applied on a selective basis. So again, this is something that you'll need to discuss. For merchants who use dynamic routing, if you have a subscription business, when the customer first sets up the authentication for you for the recurring payments, within that protocol, there's a field which pretty much has the acquirer details within that field. If you use dynamic routing, and this is where you route transactions between two processors, for whatever reason, the acquirer field within the original authentication message may be different if routed, let's say, on the third time you're charging the customer to processor B, let's say. The card issuing bank may pick up on this and may require for a step up or a challenge to the customer because the original protocol was authenticated under a different acquirer. So that's just something to be aware of, okay? As well as if in the future you decide to move, if you have a subscription business and you decide to move to a different processor, the same impact may occur. You may need to re-authenticate all your customers again, potentially. So this is something that definitely we heard a lot of businesses raise this as a potential issue within at the Merchant Risk Council with a number of processors, card issuing banks. The commission isn't going to, it was actually raised with the commission at a round table discussion, and they're not going to legislate for this. This will be down to the market to figure out themselves. So again, just something to be aware of if you run a subscription business or use that merchant initiated transactions. Again, drop off in customer conversions and revenue. So as more banks come online, you're going to see a bigger impact to your business. So there'll be peaks and troughs over the next 18 to 24 months. And you'll need to bake that into your future revenue targets when you're considering, the impacts of this. So key takeaways for you as a business. So, SCA friendly payment methods. I'm going to skip over point 1 because that's in the next slide, but there's many topics you need to discuss with your processor as soon as possible if you're not already. The second point is SCA friendly payment methods. So when we talk about strong customer authentication, it applies to all electronic payments. However, the main impact is going to be to the iframes, where I could just come to your website and enter in my details and I'm not being authenticated, or there's no authentication message like a password required. When you use Google Pay or Apple Pay, Amazon Pay, etc., so forth, GiroPay. You know, you're logging into a bank, you're logging into an account. All these methods are already compliant under the strong customer authentication regulations. So, you know, you may want to obviously adopt these payment methods on your website, especially for those markets if you're exporting into them, like the UK and Ireland, Spain, France, etc., where card payments are the primary preference for consumers when making online purchases. And you may want to have then some wording around kind of directing customers to these alternative payment methods if authentication fails, or else if you can take Moto transactions and your PCI DSS compliance allows that, definitely have that wording presented back to the customer in the decline message if they cannot authenticate for whatever reason. At your checkout flow also, you know, add messaging. So customers want to always be guided through the whole checkout. So it would, before they get to the stage of entering their card details, just have a message or a pop-up or some kind of wording there just to let them know they may be redirected for additional authentication, that this is out of your control and that this is a new regulatory requirement under PSD2. FAQs and customer support, you'll need your frontline staff who are, you know, they may begin getting phone calls around this. You'll need to let them know, update scripts, etc., and also update the FAQs on your website. I would also suggest as well, for those customers who are returning customers to you, or, you know, have created accounts with yourselves, be proactive and send them out an email message just to let them know of this regulation and that they may encounter some additional friction at the checkout. And then the last one is monitor your declines. The new decline reason code could not authenticate. So if you're not already set up, if your checkout is not already optimized for the new protocol to allow banks to challenge the customers, you know, you need to begin monitoring these declines today to see if any of these banks are trying to currently challenge. What we would say as well is just monitor as well soft declines. So these are where banks are challenging if you are ready today, and then hard declines, banks just completely declining the transaction. Speak with your processor about the exemption applications and get an agreement that they're going to support you with this. Begin testing as soon as possible. Get into the sandbox, start rolling out the different test scripts that your processor will be able to provide to you around this as well, because they will be working with other merchants regarding this. The TRA exemption I've called out on its own because it's the big one, and I would suggest you get an agreement in place with your processor as soon as possible on this. The other service availability, so MasterCard Authentication Express and Visa have a similar product. So this is where you can actually authenticate the customer at login and not at the actual checkout. So what that means is that when the customer comes and sets up an account with yourselves, they're giving you their password and they're giving you their email address and personal information. If you're capturing the password and let's say the details of the mobile phone or the device that is used, let's say a mobile phone, and you're capturing that information is compliant under the 3D Secure 2.0 protocol. So if you're capturing that, what will happen is at the first time they set up an account with you and they complete a first transaction, if they are challenged at the first transaction, you can bind that information together and send it to MasterCard. So the login information and also the authentication at the transaction stage. This information will be sent to MasterCard and MasterCard will store it. What will then happen in all subsequent transactions is when they log in to their account, you will notify MasterCard that they've logged in, we've authenticated, they're fine. Please do not step up or challenge the customer at the checkout stage. Okay, so what this means is that, you know, you have an opportunity here to remove a lot of the friction for your customers. MasterCard are also enrolling all the card issuing banks in Europe into this service, and so are Visa. So they expect this to be for there to be a pretty significant uplift for merchants who are actually going to use this service. So again, just something to be aware of. You need sponsorship from your acquirer to do this. You need to be below 13 basis points of fraud. You need to be below 13 basis points of fraud on that as well. Something to be aware of and to discuss with your processor when you get the opportunity. So again, yeah, definitely speak with your acquirer regarding that. Country adoption as well. So we know, like I mentioned earlier, France are taking the EBA have taken a position of, 31st of December 2020. However, France have already, before that position was taken by the EBA, have announced delays for up to end of 2020 as well for all industries except travel, and then travel are getting an extension of 12 months just because of the complexities of that industry. You know, Ireland, the UK, 18 months, and then, you know, you have Sweden who have pretty much said, you know, we expect this to be, you know, there to be no delays and this to be rolled out as soon as possible. So very different. Again, speak with your processor just to find out what they're hearing out on the market. And then obviously the rollout as well. And are they starting to see these declines? What banks are these declines coming from? What is the impact going to be on your business as well? So again, your processors and your acquirer is going to be key to that. So I'll hand over to my colleague Victor, who will then now take you through GPay, one of the products that is compliant under the new regulation.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, like Senan said, I'm going to talk you through GPay. Firstly, I'm going to talk about a few stats about like what the markets look like, then Google's payment strategy, and then how Google Pay looks in application. So these are according to the EHI, the German Retail Institute. Top priorities for in the payment strategy of the merchants. Number one is mobile payment, and then risk management and optimizing of the payment mix. That's something we can't really help with. But then express checkout, omni-channel payment, and then PSD2 is something that Google Pay can help with. And I hope PSD2 by now. There was a survey in the beginning of the year. I hope PSD2 by now is on the top of your priority list. But it just shows like how far behind also everyone was with applying the PSD to plans and remedies. So this is a study by the Bainard Institute that already shows you without PSD2 that 70% of all cards are abandoned. In green again are the reasons that we as Google Pay can help you with. Number one is the page wanted, or the merchant's website wanted that you create an account. The second one, which I expect to increase even more with PSD2 and the two-factor authentication, is a too long and complicated checkout process. The third one is that you couldn't see the total cost up front, and the fourth one where Google Pay can help you with is that people don't really trust websites that they don't know with their credit card information. So with that, if you have Google Pay in there, obviously you don't have to enter your credit card information anymore. You just click on Google Pay and pay with that. Okay. So here, like I said, this is again by the EHI in the online payment study 2019, a survey that retailers see that have already implemented two-factor authentication. You can see that 40% of the merchants see an even increased card abandonment rate when people use credit cards. So that's even increased to the 70% I said in the slide before. Obviously, the complaints from customers calling in are increasing, and then credit card transactions declined in general, and the credit card revenues accordingly obviously also declined as well. And then on top of that, we just saw a EuGH ruling that the direct debit might be, or is mandatory. If you have it, it's mandatory to have it across all the EU member states if you do business in those. So due to very complicated cross-border risk checks, some newspapers here, for example, the Handelsblatt, is already proclaiming that the direct debit is doomed. So obviously that currently is 20% of a revenue share in German e-commerce. That needs to go somewhere. So likely some part of that is going to go towards credit card payment as well. So again, this urgency is going to increase with this likely going away. So here's Google's payment strategy. Number one, we hope that is you second that opinion. At least 64% of merchants that have been asked by the GS1 second that opinion, and Google has always been a good partner for merchants, so that through our channels we push traffic to your website and help users find your website and obviously buy products that they need there. So that was always like Google's main source of revenue, if we will, but also Google's main contact, that a user asks something and gets a relevant answer to it. In that case, if it's a commercialized search or also an ad online somewhere that gets answered to with the right or the most relevant merchant's website. That shows that the user has become more demanding. So we're not in the age of question answer anymore. We are moving. I mean, first of all, we already are in the mobile age, so that the interface is getting smaller and smaller, but also we have all other kind of smart devices, smart homes, smartphones, obviously, smartwatches, and those devices are called smart for a reason. You just don't want to type in stuff anymore and get a one-sided answer out of it. You actually want those devices to help you in your daily lives and also perform actions for you, including transactions. And that's why a solid payments infrastructure in the backend is important to support this. So this is showing you basically what our motivation here is. We're going to provide a platform where you can easily find or discover products or yeah, whatever you need. In that case, for e-commerce, that is products through our channels. And then you can also easily convert with a one-click or two-click checkout at the end of this. So we're basically providing a seamless commerce platform, if you will, where the merchants can insert themselves without losing any of the customer touch points or any of the customer journey. So here, again, like the discovery starts with the Google channel and it hopefully seamlessly ends with Google Pay, but everything in between, in the middle, is in the hand of the merchant, and you can steer the customer's journey however you want, and also keep them obviously with account creation and all that. So here's also the sort of makes sense what our business model is. Because that's the number one question I always get, because Google Pay is not charging any fees, so neither online nor in store. Google Pay is completely free if you implement it, so no additional fees are charged. But here's the reason why: because we hope if those conversion rates in the backend go up and the commerce experience is more seamless, obviously the left side here where the customer acquisition happens becomes more efficient for you as a marketing channel, as a merchant as well. So we're hoping to just increase the efficiency of our marketing channel. That's why we don't need to actually charge any extra fees for the actual transaction in the back. Here's what we actually want with Google Pay already, so slightly touched on it. So basically Google Pay should be or is already a universal payment method that users can use anywhere. And point to note here, users can actually already use it even if you don't have like the Google Pay app installed. So Google itself is a merchant, as you can see here left. On the left side, those are all services that we have, or channels that we have that have 1 billion users each worldwide. And a lot of those channels you can actually transact already. So, for example, in the Play Store, if you download an app that you have to pay for, Google has a form of payment saved for that user. Likewise, for YouTube, if you stream a video that you have to pay for, you have to enter credit card details or PayPal for that matter to Google, which is saved to you. Oh, sorry, go back to your Google profile, or also Chrome autofill. If you've seen that, if you use Google Chrome and then you type in your payment information somewhere, you can see that pop-up that often comes up that asks you if you want to save that card to your Google profile, and all of those saved payment credentials that we have, and that's hundreds of millions worldwide, can already be used online to pay with Google Pay. So every user that has transacted anywhere on Google before can already use Google Pay as well. And then for the in-store transactions, we have an additional security layer for that. So for in-store transactions, you need to tokenize this card. That means that you get the payment credentials never saved itself on the mobile phone, and always gets transferred with a device-specific number, which protects you from if anybody like gets into your phone or hacks into your phone and steals those payment credentials. They're practically worthless because you always need a device with it. And that also it's called a device binding token, and that sort of also guarantees for the two-factor authentication that this is the one-factor possession device. So let's look online. So here's a current checkout experience. you have the product page, you put it into the cart, and you choose your shipping method, then you put your shipping information in, you have to put the card information in, then you have to put the billing information in, and you have to confirm the payment. That will even increase with 3DS 2.0. That's actually still with OTP, so that's not even compliant anymore, as we heard from Senan earlier. But he can see why you have such a high card abandonment rate. Forcing your customer to go through all of those steps, it's torture, especially on a mobile device. So why Google Pay comes, or how Google Pay comes into play. We combine all of those things in 2 steps. So the first step, you click on the Google Pay button. In the second step, the payment slider comes up with all your payment credentials, shipping information, and all that already saved. And with the fingerprint, you can then confirm the payment, which is the second factor. As I explained earlier, the first factor is the mobile device. The second factor is inherence. So a fingerprint is what you are. Alternatively, if you don't have a fingerprint set up, you can also do a device unlock, which is knowledge then. So you have a pattern or a password, and then the purchase goes through. This at the moment is still a mock in that sense, because we don't have the fingerprint within the Google Payment slider at the moment. If you go through Google Pay, you still have to click the continue button, and then you get dark screen where you then unlock the device. Still very much more seamless than going through a third-party redirect. But this is going to be in the very near future, that extra little step of having a dark screen will be within the payment slider directly. Go to the next slide, you can see specifically from the checkout experience that I showed at the beginning, where everything falls into place. So you can see, obviously, the first line is email address, then second line is the payment information, third line is the shipping information, the fourth line is the shipping method. So within Google Pay, in the payment slider, you can also choose if you want express shipping or standard shipping or whatnot. And then the bottom line, the fingerprint, here is the 3DS authentication, which you don't need because you have the 2-factor authentication built in. Exactly, and this is how it looks. This is still the old experience, but it practically will be the same. So you have Google Pay here, slider comes up, and then you continue here, and then the purchase is complete. So that is obviously extremely seamless and extremely frictionless checkout experience. Again, with the current experience today, if you have that, after the continue button, you will get a black screen and unlock your phone. But in the future, you will have, instead of the continue button within Google Pay, you will have the fingerprint or device unlock. And here's also important to say that Google Pay button itself is very easy to implement. It shouldn't take you more than a couple of hours. So the actual button, since we don't process any payments in the backend, we just pass on the secured payload to your payment processor. It literally just is a button implementation with a few lines of code. The complication obviously is then for you, how you set it into your checkout and how you put it into your checkout flow. But the actual button itself shouldn't take you more than a couple of hours to implement. So this what our current partners that have implemented it say. Obviously, you get a higher conversion rate because you remove all this friction and all this extra steps. Obviously, get a faster checkout that sort of comes with it. Google Pay is obviously also a really good tool for new customer acquisition, because you don't, what I said before, some users don't trust new websites with their payment credentials. So with Google Pay, they don't have to give them out to the new website, type them into new websites, but can just use Google Pay. And also obviously removes the friction of putting all the new customer credentials into the website. And then also some merchants also see a higher revenue through Google Pay. We have a couple of other reference partners in Germany in particular, so you can use those today already to test it out and to see. The list is not complete. We have way more partners of that live, but here, are some of the most known ones. Cool. And then Google Pay itself is an API. Obviously, like I said earlier, we want to make it a universal payment method that you can use nearly on all surfaces and interfaces. So it could also be a building block for a couple of cool innovations, and build into other Google channels, as I will show you in the next couple of slides. So one here, another example that we have live with Saturn SmartPay. So it's a scan and go, basically a scan and go solution that they developed. So it's an app we can go into the store and skip the checkout line, scanning whatever you want to buy directly through the app. And obviously, if you want to skip the checkout line, you don't want to, and you want to be fast, you don't want to spend a couple of minutes typing in all your payment credentials into the app. So that's why Google Pay is a brilliant addition to this new way of merging online and offline. Here's an integration with the Google Assistant with FlixBus. I'm not sure if you can hear, no, you can't, but I can talk you through it. So basically, you ask the Google Assistant, hey, can I get a bus from, I don't know where it goes from, for let's say Berlin to Hamburg. It gives you a couple of options and talks you through it. And then it also asks you, do you want to basically use the payment credentials that you have saved on Google, which will going to be there in a second. So here's Google Pay. It charges the card that you have on file. You confirm this, and then you will have the second factor fingerprint again here. So that also shows you, number one, Google Assistant as a new, way of selling your services, but also shows why Google Pay is very important for Google in general, to make all those other channels that we have commercializable and make you as a merchant make them usable as another channel to sell your products. Next slide, in a similar fashion, we have Google Maps. This is a integration by the Melbourne Public Transport Organization, where you can find, you can ask Google Maps, hey, how do you get from A to B? It gives you different options, and it also gives you the option to directly within Google Maps buy a public transport card or ticket, basically, and you pay it with Google Pay, and then you also can save the ticket digitally as a wallet option in Google Pay, and you can it depends on the infrastructure that the public transport organization has. Either you can do it via QR code, or you can also do it via NFC when you check in. As you can see here is the NFC integration on the right side on the picture. You can access the train that's in that space by tapping the phone. This is for accelerated mobile pages, where you search, hey, where can I find a movie or a showtime near me? So I want to watch the Avengers movie, and go directly into the buy flow from Google search. I choose my tickets here, go next, and then you pay with Google Pay. You again save the ticket into the Google Pay wallet, and then also important here, you can also use the credentials that you used with Google Pay to sign in and to create a customer account right after the purchase flow. So here, as you can see, that user has, first of all, jumped right into the buy flow from Google search, bought the ticket seamlessly with Google Pay, and then also signed up in a couple of seconds here, and is a fully signed up and hopefully loyal in the future customer. Because so the Google Pay API is available in over 70 countries, basically everywhere where we have merchant transactions ourselves, so where the Play Store is active. You can also use Google Pay online in e-commerce. I'm going to do a brief stint into in-store payments and passes as well. It's not really an e-commerce topic, but just to complete the picture of having a universal payment method. So obviously Google Pay can also be used in store, as I said, with the additional security step of the tokenization, which means that the card payments with Google Pay are also more secure in store. They're obviously also faster, because you just tap and go out, faster than putting out your cash and counting it. Also important to know, you don't have a maximum amount with Google Pay. Since you have the second factor, you don't have the 25 euro limit it is in Germany that you currently have with contactless cards. You can literally buy a car if your credit limit allows it. You don't have any extra costs. Like I said earlier, we don't charge any fees. We don't charge the merchant fees. We don't charge the bank's fees, and obviously we also don't charge the user any fees for it. And it already works everywhere where contactless or NFC works. We have the integrated banks, and the reason why we have a need to have a bank integration for the in-store payments, and that's only valid for the in-store payments, because in e-commerce you can use any bank already, is because we need those contracts and that security layer for the tokenization. Those are the banks that are supported in Germany, but also with the PayPal cooperation that we have, you can pretty much use any bank that is linked to your PayPal account. And for the merchant, if the user links the PayPal account to Google Pay, you will have a virtual MasterCard debit will be created, and for the merchant you will have a MasterCard debit fee as well if somebody uses PayPal with Google Pay in your store. And then obviously, I mean, contactless payments also works with your plastic card. So where's the benefit in putting it in Google Pay? I mean, obviously you don't have to carry around the plastic card, but also we can enrich that purchase experience. And Google Pay also acts as a classic digital wallet, if you will. So you can save your loyalty cards in there, for example, with MediaMarkt Saturn, we already have an integration that does that. You can save offers in there as well. You put your transit passes, which I showed you earlier as well with the Melbourne example. You can put your boarding passes in there, like the integration we have in Lufthansa, and you also have event tickets, cinema tickets, as I showed you earlier as well. And all of that sort of enriches basically Google Pay as a tap and pay solution, shortens the purchase path, but also enriches it with having all those flavors in there. You can either redeem those like loyalty offers and all that via QR code, but you can also redeem those with a contactless tap as well with our solution called Smart Tap. But I don't want to go into too much detail here because it's mostly about SCA and PSD2 and e-commerce, so that's not the topic of today. Google Pay app, like I said, because we need that specific extra security step of the tokenization, and we need the bank integrations for that. That's why the Google Pay app itself, so the in-store payment functionality is only live in 30 countries, whereas before for e-commerce it's pretty much live everywhere. Here are some links that lead you to Google Pay and more information. The first link leads you to general information, and you can also access the developer documentation. The Google Pay API is an open API. Everybody can implement it into their websites and apps. Before you get production access, obviously you get vetted by the Google team and to see that you're a proper website and you're not doing some shady business, and that your brand guidelines are compliant. But other than that, anybody can access the API to develop documentation and integrate it. And the second link is a demo where you can it's a demo website or demo shop that we set up where you can already test the Google Pay integration and see how it looks like. Okay, so that concludes the content for the day. And now we're opening up for any questions that you might have. Thank you all for your time. Hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully we could shed some light into both SCA and PSD2, as well as Google Payments functionalities with Google Pay. And thanks for listening, and hope to hear from you soon.
Thanks everybody, appreciate it.
Bye.